The trauma bay doors slammed open at 3:47 a.m., and Eleanor Hale knew someone was about to die. Blood pooled across the gurney wheels, leaving a wet crimson trail on white tile. The patient, mid-30s, military buzz cut, chest ripped open by shrapnel, was gasping like a drowning man. His vitals screamed on the monitor. Flatline was 60 seconds away, maybe less. Dr. Marcus Vale stood frozen, gloved hands hovering uselessly above the wound. Two residents beside him traded frantic glances. Nobody moved. Nobody knew what to do. Eleanor stepped forward, calm, steady. Her voice cut through the chaos like a scalpel. "Clamp the subclavian, now!" Vale's head snapped toward her, eyes wide with disbelief and rage. "You don't give orders in my room." Then the patient moved. His blood-slick hand rose, trembling, fingers barely forming the shape. A salute, weak, desperate, directed at her. The entire room went silent. Eleanor's face didn't change, but her hand lifted, sharp, crisp, military perfect, and she returned it. Then she looked at Vale, her voice dropping to something cold and absolute. "Get out of my way." If you want to see how a woman they called washed up just shattered every assumption in that hospital, stick with me till the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's rewind, because 3 weeks ago, they didn't even know her name. Eleanor Hale clocked in at Redwood General every morning at 5:58 a.m., 2 minutes early. Like clockwork. She wore the same pale blue scrubs, kept her graying hair pulled into a tight bun, and never spoke unless spoken to. Most days, nobody spoke to her at all. She was 62, the oldest nurse on the floor, and in the eyes of the younger staff, she might as well have been invisible. "Did you see her trying to work the new IV pump yesterday?" One of the residents whispered near the nurse's station, loud enough to carry. "Took her like 5 minutes just to get the menu open." Laughter rippled through the group. Eleanor, restocking gauze 10 feet away, didn't react. She finished her task, logged the inventory, and moved on to the next room. She'd learned a long time ago that some battles weren't worth the breath. But Dr. Lillian Cross, the head of emergency medicine, noticed everything. And she noticed Eleanor. "She's a liability," Cross said flatly during a department meeting that afternoon. She stood at the head of the conference table, arms crossed, her tone clipped and clinical. "Patient care is evolving. Technology is evolving. Eleanor Hale is not." A few heads nodded. Someone coughed. Nobody disagreed. "She's been here 3 months," Cross continued. "Zero adaptability, zero initiative. And frankly, she slows the rest of the team down. I'm recommending we begin phasing her out." Phasing her out. Polite hospital speak for firing someone too old to fight back. Dr. Marcus Vale, seated near the window, didn't even look up from his phone. "Agreed. We need people who can keep up, not babysit someone stuck in the 90s. Eleanor wasn't in the room, but she heard about it anyway. News traveled fast in a place like Redwood General, especially when it was about you. She said nothing, did nothing, just kept showing up at 5:58 a.m., kept doing her job with the same quiet precision she always had. If they wanted her gone, they'd have to say it to her face. That confrontation came sooner than expected. None. It was a Tuesday. Eleanor was restocking Trauma Bay 3 when Cross appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand, expression unreadable. "Eleanor." A word. Eleanor set down the supply box and turned, wiping her hands on her scrubs. "Of course." Cross stepped inside and closed the door. The air in the small room turned stale. "I'll be direct. Your performance hasn't met the standards we expect here. The technology, the pace, it's clear you're struggling." Eleanor's face remained neutral. "I complete my tasks. My patients have had no complaints." "It's not about complaints, it's about efficiency, team cohesion." Cross's tone softened, but only slightly. "Look, I'm not here to make this harder than it has to be. You've had a long career. Maybe it's time to consider stepping back. Enjoy retirement. Spend time with family." Family. The word landed like a punch Eleanor didn't let show. "I don't have family," she said quietly. Cross blinked. For a moment, something almost human flickered across her face. Then it was gone. "Then take time for yourself. Travel. Rest. You've earned it." "I'm not tired." Eleanor? I'm not tired, Eleanor repeated, her voice still calm but carrying an edge now, faint but unmistakable. And I'm not leaving. Cross's jaw tightened. She adjusted her grip on the clipboard. Then I'll be blunt. If your performance doesn't improve, and quickly, I'll have no choice but to let you go, officially. Eleanor met her gaze, steady, unflinching. Understood. Cross left without another word. Eleanor stood alone in the trauma bay, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. She didn't cry, didn't curse. She just went back to restocking supplies, one item at a time, her hands as steady as they'd always been. But somewhere deep in her chest, something old and cold stirred. Something she'd buried a long time ago. Bam! The younger staff didn't hide their contempt. If anything, Cross's barely veiled threat emboldened them. Think she'll actually quit? One nurse muttered in the break room, stirring her coffee. God, I hope so, another replied. She's like a relic. Every time I see her, I feel like I'm working in a museum. Eleanor walked past the open door. Neither of them noticed. Or maybe they did, and just didn't care. Dr. Vale was the worst. He didn't just dismiss her, he weaponized her presence. During rounds, he'd make a show of asking her questions he knew she couldn't answer quickly, then cut her off before she could finish. Eleanor, what's the updated protocol for sepsis management? She'd start to answer, and he'd wave her off. Never mind, I'll ask someone current. The resident snickered. Eleanor said nothing. But one of them, a second-year named Daniel Park, watched her differently. He didn't laugh. He didn't join in. And one night, after a brutal 12-hour shift, he caught up with her in the parking garage. Hey, Eleanor! She stopped, keys in hand, and turned. Dr. Park. Just Daniel's fine. He hesitated, then said, I wanted to apologize for the way people talk to you. It's not right. Eleanor studied him for a moment. He looked exhausted, sincere. You didn't say anything. I didn't stop it either. He shoved his hands into his coat pockets. For what it's worth, you're better at this job than half the people in there. She almost smiled, almost. Thank you, Daniel. He nodded and walked away. Eleanor watched him go, then unlocked her car and drove home to an apartment that was too quiet, too empty, and filled with too many ghosts. On her kitchen counter sat a single photo in a wooden frame. A young man in marine dress blues, smiling, proud, alive. Her son. Eleanor didn't look at the photo as she made tea. She didn't need to. His face was burned into her memory, along with the day they told her he wasn't coming home. That was 2 years ago. 2 years since the knock on the door. 2 years since the folded flag. 2 years since she'd had a reason to wake up that didn't involve simply going through the motions. She drank her tea in silence. Then she went to bed, set her alarm for 5:30 a.m., and prepared to do it all over again. The mockery continued. It was small things, mostly. A resident rolling her eyes when Eleanor took an extra moment to chart a medication. A nurse sighing loudly when Eleanor asked a clarifying question about a new protocol. Vale making jokes in the break room about teaching old dogs new tricks while staring directly at her. Eleanor absorbed it all. She'd survived worse, much worse. But there were cracks forming. Not in her competence. Her hands were as steady as ever, her knowledge as sharp. The cracks were in her patience, in her willingness to tolerate disrespect from people who'd never seen a fraction of what she had. One afternoon, she was changing the dressing on a post-op patient when a third-year resident named Jessica Tran breezed into the room, barely glancing at Eleanor. I'll take over, Tran said. Eleanor didn't move. I'm almost finished. Yeah, well, I'm here now. Dr. Cross wants this done faster. Eleanor's hands paused. She looked up. Faster isn't always better. Tran's expression hardened. Are you seriously lecturing me right now? I'm reminding you that this patient has fragile tissue. If you rush, you'll cause tearing. I know how to do my job. Then do it right. The words came out sharper than Eleanor intended. Tran's face flushed. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a hiss. You know what? I'm tired of this. You act like you're so much better than the rest of us, but you're just an old nurse who can't keep up. Maybe Dr. Cross is right. Maybe you should just go. Eleanor held her gaze, said nothing, finished the dressing with calm, deliberate precision, then stepped back. Patient stable. Vitals are logged. Call if there's any change. She walked out. Tran stood there, fists clenched, watching her leave. In the hallway, Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest, but her face remained smooth, unreadable. She'd learned long ago how to bury rage so deep no one could see it, but it was there, simmering. 3 days later, the hospital descended into chaos. It started with a call from dispatch, mass casualty event. Industrial accident at the Harlow Steelworks, 2 miles outside Silvergate City. Explosions. Fires. At least 15 critically wounded, more expected. Redwood General went into overdrive. Trauma bays prepped. Surgeons summoned. Every available nurse pulled to the floor. Eleanor moved through the chaos like water, calm, efficient, exactly where she needed to be. She set up IV lines, prepped crash carts, organized supply stations. No wasted motion, no hesitation. But the look she got from the other staff said everything. Stay out of the way. Don't slow us down. The first wave of patients arrived. Mangled limbs, burns, screaming, blood everywhere. Eleanor took a station in Bay 2 and got to work, stabilizing a steelworker with second-degree burns and a punctured lung. Her hands moved fast. Practiced. She didn't need to think. It was muscle memory. Vale stormed past, barking orders. "Where's the intubation kit? Someone get me the damn intubation kit." "Here." Eleanor handed it to him without looking up. He snatched it, said nothing, and moved on. She didn't care. She kept working. The man in front of her was fading fast. His breathing was shallow, labored. His skin had gone gray. Eleanor worked quickly, inserting a chest tube with practiced efficiency. The lung reinflated. The man gasped, coughed, then started breathing more steadily. "Stay with me," she murmured. "You're doing fine." He nodded weakly. Eleanor adjusted his oxygen flow, checked his vitals, then flagged a passing nurse. "He needs imaging, chest x-ray, full trauma panel." The nurse nodded and moved on. Eleanor wiped her hands and turned to the next patient. A woman, early 20s, unconscious, skull fracture visible. Eleanor checked her pupils, assessed the damage, then called for a neurosurgeon. The response was immediate. The woman was whisked away. Bay 2 cleared. Eleanor moved to Bay 4, then Bay 1, then back to 2. She worked for hours, barely stopping, barely thinking, just moving, doing, saving. Around her, the younger staff stumbled. They fumbled with equipment. Second-guessed decisions. Panicked when patients crashed. Eleanor didn't panic. She never panicked. But then the doors slammed open again, and everything stopped. This patient was different. Military fatigues, dog tags. His chest was torn open, shrapnel embedded deep, blood pouring out faster than anyone could control. 2 paramedics were doing CPR on the gurney, faces pale, voices tight. GSW to the chest, probable hemothorax, pressure's bottoming out. He's crashing. They wheeled him into Bay 1. Vale rushed over. Cross appeared from nowhere. Residents swarmed. And Eleanor, standing at the edge of the chaos, saw something no one else did. The way the blood pooled. The angle of the wound, the barely visible flutter of a collapsed lung trying to expand. She'd seen this before. Too many times. Vale was shouting, hands slick with blood. "Get me suction! Someone get me suction!" A resident fumbled with the equipment. Another tried to place a chest tube and missed. Twice. The monitor screamed, vitals plummeting. Eleanor's instincts kicked in. Not the instincts of a nurse. The instincts of a combat surgeon who'd worked in field hospitals where one mistake meant death and hesitation was a luxury no one could afford. She stepped forward. "You're losing him." Vale's head snapped up. "What?" "The subclavian artery," she said, calm and clear. "It's nicked. You're treating the lung and missing the bleed." Vale stared at her. "I don't have time for guesses." "It's not a guess." Her voice didn't rise, didn't waver. "Clamp it, now, or he dies." Cross stepped forward. "Eleanor, this isn't your call." "Then make it yours," Eleanor said, locking eyes with her. "But make it fast." For a split second, Vale hesitated. Cross looked between them, face unreadable. Then the patient's hand moved, weak, shaking, rising, a salute, directed at Eleanor. The room went dead silent. Every eye locked on her. The monitor's flatline alarm started to wail. And Eleanor Hale, the woman they called washed up, slow, outdated, lifted her hand and returned the salute. Sharp, perfect, military precise. Then she looked at Vale, and her voice dropped to something cold and absolute. Get out of my way. Eleanor didn't wait for permission. She moved to the table, gloved hands already reaching for the retractor. Vale stumbled back, too stunned to argue. Cross opened her mouth, then closed it. Eleanor's voice cut through the chaos like a drill sergeant on a parade ground. Daniel, chest tube kit. Now, you... She pointed at a nurse. 2 units Oneg running wide open. You... Another nurse. Manual pressure here, don't let up. They moved, not because they understood, because her tone left no room for question. She located the subclavian artery in seconds. The nick was small, almost invisible, but it was bleeding fast. She clamped it with one hand, applied a suture with the other, movements so precise they looked effortless. But it wasn't effortless. It was the result of 1,000 similar procedures performed under impossible conditions. In tents, in bunkers, in the back of transport vehicles while mortars fell around her. The monitor's alarm stopped. The numbers stabilized. Slowly, then faster. Heartbeat. Steady. Rising. Eleanor didn't stop. She reinforced the suture, checked for secondary bleeding, then stabilized the lung. Her hands moved without pause, each motion deliberate, each decision instantaneous. Daniel handed her instruments before she asked. The nurses around her fell into rhythm, following her lead without question. 15 minutes later, the patient was stable. Eleanor stepped back, peeling off her gloves. Her scrubs were soaked in blood. Her face was calm. He'll need imaging, chest x-ray, full trauma panel. Keep him monitored for the next 6 hours. Any changes, page me. She turned and walked out of the bay. Behind her, 20 people stood frozen, staring at the space where she'd been. Vale looked at the patient, at the monitor, at the sutures holding the man's life together. Then he looked at Cross. Neither of them said a word. The hospital didn't sleep that night. Patients kept coming. Eleanor kept working. By sunrise, the chaos had settled into exhausted silence, and the staff staggered through their shifts on fumes and adrenaline. Eleanor was restocking Bay 3, again, when Daniel found her. Hey, she glanced up. Dr. Park. That guy, Daniel said, voice low. The one you saved. They're saying he's special forces, some kind of commander. He paused. He asked for you, by name. Eleanor's hand stilled for just a moment. Then she resumed stacking gauze. I'm sure he's confused. He wasn't confused. Daniel stepped closer. Eleanor, who are you? She met his gaze, steady, unreadable. I'm a nurse. You're not just a nurse. Eleanor didn't answer. She finished the restock, logged the count, and walked past him without another word. But Daniel stood there, staring after her, a dozen questions burning in his mind. And across the hospital, in a private recovery room, a Navy SEAL commander named Victor Reese lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his chest wrapped in bandages and his mind replaying the moment a 62-year-old woman saved his life with the precision of a combat surgeon. He reached for his phone, made a call. His voice was rough but steady. Yeah. I need you to pull a file for me. Name's Eleanor Hale. I don't care how deep you have to dig. I need to know who she really is. On the other end of the line, someone started typing, and in the quiet hours before dawn, the truth began to surface. By midday, the hospital was still reeling. The mass casualty event had stretched every resource to the breaking point. Beds were full. Surgeons were running on coffee and willpower. Nurses moved like ghosts through the halls, pale and shaking. But the whispers had started. Did you see what Eleanor did? She just took over, like it was nothing. That guy saluted her. Why would he salute her? Eleanor ignored it all. She worked her shift, logged her hours, and prepared to leave. But as she passed the main nurse's station, Cross intercepted her. Eleanor, my office. Now. Eleanor followed without a word. Cross's office was small, cramped, filled with files and stacks of paperwork. She closed the door and gestured to a chair. Eleanor remained standing. What you did last night, Cross began, her voice tight, controlled, was reckless. Eleanor said nothing. You overstepped, undermined Dr. Vale, took command of a trauma bay without authorization. I saved a man's life. That's not the point. Then what is? Cross's jaw clenched. The point is that you don't have the authority to make those calls. You're a nurse, not a surgeon, not a commander, a nurse. Eleanor's expression didn't change. I did what needed to be done. And what if you'd been wrong? What if that patient had died on your watch? He didn't. But he could have. And then this hospital and you would be facing a lawsuit, an investigation, and God knows what else. Cross leaned forward. You put us all at risk. Eleanor's voice remained calm. I put nothing at risk except my own reputation, which, as you've made clear, doesn't matter much around here. Cross's face flushed. That's not... It is. Eleanor's tone sharpened, just slightly. You've wanted me gone since the day I arrived. You've made that abundantly clear. So let's not pretend this is about protocol or liability. This is about control. And last night, I took it from you. Silence filled the room. Cross's hands curled into fists on the desk. You're on probation, effective immediately. One more incident, one more step out of line, and you're done. Eleanor nodded once. Understood. She turned and left. Cross sat alone in her office, staring at the door, her mind racing. Because deep down, beneath the anger and the wounded pride, was a single, nagging question. Who the hell is Eleanor Hale? The answer came faster than anyone expected. Victor Reese was awake by evening, sitting up, breathing on his own. The doctors called it a miracle. Reese called it Eleanor. He asked for her 3 times. Each time, the nurses deflected. She's off shift. She's busy. I'll let her know. But Reese wasn't stupid. He knew evasion when he heard it, so he made another call. This one to a contact in naval intelligence. A woman named Lieutenant Ava Ortiz, who owed him more favors than she could count. Victor, you sound like hell. I feel like hell, but I need something. Always do. What is it? Eleanor Hale, nurse, works at Redwood General in Silvergate City. I need her full file. Everything. A pause. Why? Because she saved my life. And I want to know who I'm thanking. Ortiz's voice shifted, became careful. Victor, are you sure you want to know? What's that supposed to mean? Another pause, longer this time, then quietly, I'll send it over. But don't say I didn't warn you. The file arrived 30 minutes later, encrypted, classified. Reese opened it on his phone, squinting at the small screen, and started reading. His expression changed, slowly, from curiosity to confusion to shock to something close to awe. Eleanor Hale wasn't just a nurse. She was Colonel Eleanor Hale, United States Army, retired. 26 years of service, 15 of those in combat zones, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. She'd run field hospitals under fire, performed surgeries in bombed-out buildings, saved hundreds of lives in conditions that would have broken most people. She'd been decorated, multiple times, Silver Star, Bronze Star, Legion of Merit, and then, 2 years ago, she'd resigned, quietly. No fanfare, no ceremony. The file didn't say why, but Reese found a note buried in the records. A casualty report. Marine Sergeant Andrew Hale, killed in action. Helmand Province. Her son. Reese closed the file, sat back against the pillows, stared at the ceiling, and for the first time in years, he felt something close to humility. The next morning, Eleanor arrived at the hospital at 5:58 a.m., as always. She clocked in, checked the assignment board, and headed to her floor. But something was different. The nurse's station was quieter than usual. People glanced at her as she passed, then looked away quickly. Whispers followed her like shadows. Eleanor ignored it. She'd dealt with whispers before. She was halfway through her morning rounds when Daniel appeared beside her, slightly out of breath. Eleanor, the guy from last night, Reese. He's asking for you again. Tell him I'm busy. He won't take no for an answer. He's threatening to discharge himself if you don't show up. Eleanor paused, looked at Daniel. He's stable enough to be that stubborn? Apparently. She sighed. Fine, I'll stop by. She finished checking on her current patient, then made her way to the private recovery wing. Reese's room was at the end of the hall, door half open. She knocked once. "Mr. Reese?" "Come in." She stepped inside. Reese was sitting up, looking remarkably alert for someone who'd been half dead 12 hours ago. He watched her enter, his expression unreadable. "You're looking better," Eleanor said. "Thanks to you. Thanks to a lot of people." "No." His voice was firm. "Thanks to you. Everyone else was panicking. You weren't." Eleanor didn't respond. She checked his vitals, adjusted his IV, made notes on the chart. Reese watched her the entire time. Finally, he said, "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Eleanor's hand paused on the chart. "Tell them what?" "Who you are. What you've done." She set the chart down, met his gaze. "Because it doesn't matter. It matters to me. You don't owe me anything. I owe you my life. Then live it well." Her voice was calm, final. "That's all I need." She turned to leave. "Colonel?" Eleanor stopped, didn't turn around. Reese's voice softened. "I read your file. I know about your son. I'm sorry." Eleanor stood there for a long moment. Then, without looking back, she said quietly, "So am I." And she walked out. But the damage was done. Because Reese wasn't the only one who'd made calls. Word spread, fast. By midday, half the hospital knew. By evening, everyone did. Colonel Eleanor Hale, war hero, legend, working as a floor nurse at Redwood General. The reactions varied. Some people were stunned, others embarrassed. A few, like Daniel, felt vindicated. But the ones who mattered most, the ones who'd mocked her, dismissed her, pushed her toward the door, felt something much worse. Shame. Vale couldn't meet her eyes when they passed in the hall. Tran mumbled an apology that Eleanor didn't acknowledge. Even Cross, iron-willed and untouchable, seemed smaller somehow. But Eleanor didn't gloat, didn't confront, didn't say a word. She just kept working, kept showing up at 5:58 a.m., kept saving lives. Because that's what she did. That's who she was. And nothing, no title, no recognition, no apology, would ever change that. 3 days after the mass casualty event, Eleanor was finishing her shift when she found an envelope taped to her locker. No name, no return address, just her locker number written in neat block letters. She opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, a transfer request, signed by Cross. Eleanor stared at it, read it twice, then folded it carefully and tucked it into her bag. She didn't cry, didn't rage, didn't break. She just closed her locker, grabbed her coat, and walked out into the cold night air. Behind her, the hospital hummed with life. Patients recovering, doctors working, nurses saving lives. And somewhere in the midst of it all, the truth finally settled in. Eleanor Hale had never needed their respect, but they sure as hell needed hers. The transfer request sat on Eleanor's kitchen table for 2 days, untouched. She didn't open it again, didn't need to. She'd memorized every word the first time, effective immediately, reassignment to the geriatric ward, day shift only, limited patient contact. It was a demotion dressed up in polite language, and everyone knew it. Cross wanted her out of emergency medicine, out of sight, out of the way. Eleanor made her tea, stared at the paper, and felt nothing. Not anger, not disappointment, just a hollow kind of exhaustion that had become familiar over the past 2 years. On the third morning, she folded the request in half, slipped it into her bag, and drove to the hospital. She arrived at 5:58 a.m., clocked in, checked the board. Her name was still listed under trauma rotation. Either Cross hadn't processed the paperwork yet, or she was waiting for Eleanor to sign it first. Either way, Eleanor had a shift to work. She moved through her rounds with the same quiet efficiency she always had. Checked vitals, changed dressings, restocked supplies. But the atmosphere around her had shifted. People watched her now, not with contempt, with something closer to uncertainty. A nurse named Angela, who'd laughed at Eleanor just a week ago, approached her near the supply closet. "Hey, Eleanor." Eleanor glanced up from the inventory sheet. "Angela. Angela hesitated, then pushed forward. "I wanted to say I'm sorry for the things I said. I didn't know. You didn't need to know, Eleanor said quietly. You just needed to be decent. Angela's face flushed. She nodded once and walked away. Eleanor went back to counting gauze pads. The apologies kept coming, small, awkward, most of them insincere. People weren't sorry for what they'd done. They were sorry they'd been caught doing it to the wrong person. Eleanor accepted none of them, acknowledged none of them. She just kept working. But the tension in the hospital was palpable. Everyone knew something was coming. They just didn't know what. Victor Reese was discharged that afternoon. Against his doctor's orders, but he'd signed the waiver, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop him. He moved slowly, chest still wrapped, but he was upright and breathing on his own. Eleanor was restocking Bay 2 when he found her. Leaving without saying goodbye? She asked, not looking up. Wouldn't dream of it. He leaned against the doorframe, favoring his left side. I wanted to thank you, officially. You already did. Not the way I should have. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black case. This is for you. Eleanor set down the supply box and turned. I don't want anything. It's not a gift. It's recognition. He opened the case. Inside was a medal. Silver. Worn. This was given to me by a Marine sergeant in Fallujah. He saved my life. Told me to pass it on to someone who deserved it more. Eleanor stared at the medal. Didn't reach for it. I can't take that. You already earned it. Reese! Victor. She met his gaze, steady, unflinching. Victor. I did my job. That's all. No, you did more than your job. You did what no one else in that room could do. He stepped closer. And if the people here don't see that, they're blind. Eleanor's jaw tightened. She looked away. They see what they want to see. Then make them see the truth. I'm not here to make anyone see anything. I'm here to work. Victor studied her for a long moment. Then he closed the case and slipped it back into his jacket. If you change your mind, you know where to find me. He turned and walked out, moving carefully, one hand braced against the wall. Eleanor watched him go. Then she went back to restocking supplies, her hands as steady as ever. But something had shifted. Not in her, in the air around her, like the pressure before a storm. Well, the storm broke 2 hours later. Eleanor was in the break room, finishing a cup of coffee, when Cross walked in. She wasn't alone. Behind her was a man in a suit, mid-50s, gray hair, expensive watch. He carried a briefcase and had the look of someone used to being obeyed. Eleanor, Cross said, this is Raymond Kellerman, hospital administration. Eleanor set down her coffee. Mr. Kellerman, Ms. Hale. His voice was smooth, professional. I've been reviewing your file. Quite impressive. Thank you. I'd like to discuss your future here at Redwood General. Eleanor glanced at Cross. Her expression was unreadable. I already received a transfer request. Yes, about that. Kellerman opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Dr. Cross submitted the request as part of a departmental restructuring. However, given recent events, the board has decided to take a different approach. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. What kind of approach? We'd like to offer you a position as a trauma consultant. You'd work directly with our surgical teams, provide training to residents, and oversee high-risk cases. He smiled, polished, calculated. It's a significant promotion, higher pay, better hours, and full authority in the trauma department. Silence filled the room. Eleanor looked at Cross. Her face had gone pale. This wasn't her idea. This was damage control. I'm a nurse, Eleanor said quietly. You're more than that, Kellerman replied, and we'd be fools not to utilize your experience. You didn't seem to think so a week ago. Kellerman's smile faltered, just slightly. Mistakes were made, we're correcting them. By offering me a position I didn't apply for. By offering you the recognition you deserve. Eleanor's gaze shifted back to Cross. Does she agree? Cross's jaw clenched, but she said, yes. It was a lie. Eleanor could see it in her eyes, but it didn't matter. Cross had been overruled, outmaneuvered, and she was furious. Eleanor looked back at Kellerman. I'll think about it. Kellerman blinked. I'm sorry? I said I'll think about it. Ms. Hale, This is a very generous offer. I understand, and I'll think about it. She stood, picked up her coffee, and walked out. Behind her, Kellerman stared at the empty doorway, stunned. Cross said nothing, just turned and left. Eleanor didn't go back to the floor. She went to the parking garage, sat in her car, and stared at the steering wheel. They wanted to promote her, not because she'd earned it, because they were scared. Scared of lawsuits, scared of bad press, scared of what would happen if the story got out, that they'd tried to push out a decorated war hero. It wasn't recognition. It was a bribe. Eleanor started the car and drove home. That night, she stood in her apartment staring at the photo of her son. Andrew had been 24 when he died. Bright, driven, full of plans. He'd wanted to be a teacher after his service ended, wanted to help kids, make a difference. He'd made a difference, all right, just not the way he'd planned. Eleanor picked up the photo, ran her thumb along the edge of the frame. "What would you do?" she whispered. The apartment stayed silent. She set the photo down, made tea, and sat at the kitchen table. The transfer request was still there, folded in half. She unfolded it, read it again. Then she pulled out a pen and wrote a single word across the top, declined. She folded it again, tucked it into her bag, and went to bed. The next morning, Eleanor arrived at 5:58 a.m. and went straight to Cross's office. The door was closed. She knocked once. "Come in?" Eleanor stepped inside. Cross was at her desk, typing furiously on her laptop. She didn't look up. "I'm busy, Eleanor." "This will only take a moment." Eleanor set the folded transfer request on the desk. Cross stopped typing, looked at the paper, then at Eleanor. "You're declining the consultant position?" "No, I'm declining the transfer." Cross's eyes narrowed. "They're the same thing." "They're not. The transfer was your idea. The consultant position was Kellerman's. I'm declining both." "So what do you want?" "To keep doing my job. Same shift, same responsibilities, same pay." Eleanor's voice remained calm, even. "I don't need a promotion. I don't need recognition. I just need to be left alone to do what I do." Cross leaned back in her chair, studying her. "You realize you're making this harder than it needs to be." I realize you wanted me gone, and now you can't get rid of me without making the hospital look bad." Eleanor's tone didn't shift. "So let's make this simple. I stay, you stay, and we both do our jobs. And if I refuse, then I'll file a formal complaint with the board, cite the hostile work environment, the discrimination, the retaliation." Eleanor leaned forward slightly. "And unlike you, I have witnesses, dates, documentation." Cross's face flushed. Her hands curled into fists on the desk. "You're bluffing. Try me." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Cross picked up the transfer request, crumpled it into a ball, and tossed it into the trash. "Fine, you stay, but don't expect special treatment." "I never did." Eleanor turned and walked out. Behind her, Cross sat alone in her office, staring at the crumpled paper in the trash, her mind racing. She'd underestimated Eleanor, badly, and now she was paying the price. Word spread fast. By midday, everyone knew Eleanor had turned down the promotion. The reactions were mixed. Some people respected her for it. Others thought she was crazy. A few, like Vale, saw it as an insult. "She turned it down?" Vale said, standing near the nurse's station. "They offer her a consultant position, and she just says no?" Daniel, organizing charts nearby, didn't look up. "Maybe she doesn't want it. Nobody turns down that kind of money." "She did." Vale shook his head. "She's making a point, trying to embarrass the administration. Or maybe she just wants to do her job without all the politics." Vale snorted. "Yeah, sure. But Daniel wasn't wrong. Eleanor didn't care about the politics, didn't care about the title. She cared about the work, and the work didn't require a promotion." Still, the tension lingered, because Eleanor's refusal had created a problem. The hospital had offered her a public olive branch, and she'd snapped it in half. Now they looked desperate. And desperate organizations did dangerous things. 3 days later, Eleanor was restocking Trauma Bay 1 when a patient was rushed in. 60-year-old male. Cardiac arrest. CPR in progress. Eleanor moved immediately, assisting the team. Chest compressions, defibrillation, medications. The man's heart refused to restart. Again, the attending physician shouted, "Charge to 200." Eleanor placed the paddles. Shocked him. Nothing. 250. Shock. Nothing. 300. Shock. The monitor beeped. Once, twice, then settled into a rhythm. The man gasped, eyes fluttering open. The room exhaled collectively. Eleanor stepped back, peeling off her gloves. The attending, a surgeon named Dr. Patel, looked at her. "Nice work." Eleanor nodded. "He'll need monitoring, possible stent placement." "Already on it." She left the bay, washed her hands, and moved to the next case. Routine, mechanical, just another save. But outside the trauma bay, a nurse named Maria watched her leave, then pulled out her phone and made a call. "Yeah, it's me. She just saved another one. No, I'm serious. She's unreal." A pause. "I don't know, but people are noticing. A lot of people." Maria hung up and went back to work. And somewhere in the hospital, the wheels started turning. We'll sit. That evening, Eleanor was finishing her shift when Kellerman appeared again. This time, he was alone. "Ms. Hale, do you have a moment?" Eleanor set down her clipboard. "Mr. Kellerman, I wanted to follow up on our conversation about the consultant position. I gave you my answer." "I know, but I'd like to understand why." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're obviously qualified. The pay is excellent. The hours are better. Why turn it down?" Eleanor met his gaze. "Because it wasn't offered in good faith." Kellerman blinked. "I'm sorry? You're not offering me a promotion because I earned it. You're offering it because you're scared. Scared of bad press, scared of lawsuits, scared of what happens if people find out how I was treated here." Her voice remained calm, clinical. "So no, I don't want your promotion. I want to do my job. That's it." Kellerman's face hardened. "You're making a mistake. That's my choice to make." "Is it?" His tone shifted, became colder. "Because if you're not willing to work with us, Ms. Hale, you might find this hospital isn't as welcoming as you think." Eleanor's expression didn't change. "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality. Hospitals are complicated places. Politics matter. Relationships matter. And if you insist on being difficult, you'll find yourself very isolated very quickly." Eleanor stepped closer, close enough that Kellerman instinctively took a step back. "I've been isolated my entire life. I've worked in war zones where isolation was the least of my problems. So if you think you can intimidate me by threatening to make my life uncomfortable, you're wasting your time." Kellerman stared at her. Then he turned and walked away without another word. Eleanor stood alone in the hallway, her heart pounding in her chest. But her face remained smooth, unreadable. She'd just made an enemy, a powerful one, and she didn't care. 2 days later, the hospital board called an emergency meeting. Eleanor wasn't invited, but Daniel was, along with every senior physician and department head. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. When it ended, Daniel found Eleanor in the supply room. "We need to talk." Eleanor looked up from the inventory sheet. "About?" "They're investigating you." Eleanor's hand stilled. "For what?" "Overstepping. Practicing medicine without a license. They're saying you performed surgical procedures in the trauma bay without authorization." Eleanor set down the clipboard. "I saved a man's life." "I know, but they're twisting it, saying you took over from Vale, saying you acted outside your scope of practice." Daniel's voice was tight. "Cross is pushing it, hard." Eleanor's jaw clenched. "Of course she is." "There's more. They're reviewing all your cases from the past 3 months. Every patient you touched, every decision you made. They're looking for anything they can use against you." "Let them look." "Eleanor, you don't understand. If they find something, anything, they'll use it to fire you, and they'll make sure you never work in a hospital again." Eleanor met his gaze, steady, unflinching. "Then I guess I'd better make sure they don't find anything." Daniel stared at her. "You're not scared." "I'm terrified. But fear doesn't change what needs to be done." She picked up the clipboard and went back to counting supplies. Daniel stood there for a moment, watching her. Then he left. And Eleanor, alone in the supply room, allowed herself one shaky breath before locking it all back down. But the investigation moved quickly. Too quickly. Within a week, Eleanor was called into a formal hearing. Board members, administrators, Cross, Vale. All of them seated at a long table, staring at her like she was a criminal. Kellerman ran the meeting. His tone was professional, detached. Ms. Hale, you're here to answer questions regarding your conduct during the mass casualty event on the 15th, specifically your actions in Trauma Bay 1. Eleanor sat across from them, hands folded in her lap. I'm aware. Dr. Vale has submitted a complaint alleging that you overstepped your authority, performed surgical procedures without supervision, and undermined his decisions in a critical situation. Kellerman looked at her. How do you respond? I saved a patient's life. That's not an answer to the question. It's the only answer that matters. Vale leaned forward. You had no right to take over that room. I was the attending physician. You're a nurse. You don't get to make those calls. Eleanor's gaze shifted to him. You were panicking. The patient was dying. Someone had to act. So you decided it should be you? Yes. Based on what authority? Based on the fact that I knew what I was doing, and you didn't. The room went silent. Vale's face turned red. You arrogant. That's enough, Kellerman cut in. He looked at Eleanor. Ms. Hale, your military background is impressive, but this isn't a battlefield. There are protocols, chains of command. You can't just take over because you think you know better. I didn't think. I knew. And how exactly did you know? Eleanor leaned forward slightly. Because I've done it before. Hundreds of times, in worse conditions, with less equipment, and I've never lost a patient I could save. That doesn't give you the right. It gives me the responsibility. Her voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it now. You hired me to be a nurse, and part of being a nurse is knowing when to step up. I did that, and I'd do it again. Kellerman's jaw tightened. He glanced at the others. Cross looked smug. Vale looked furious. We'll deliberate and notify you of our decision within 48 hours. Kellerman closed his folder. You're dismissed. Eleanor stood, turned, and walked out. Behind her, the board erupted into argument, and outside in the hallway, Daniel was waiting. How bad? Eleanor kept walking. Bad. What do? We wait. The next day, Eleanor worked her shift like nothing had happened, but the tension was suffocating. Everyone knew. Everyone watched. Victor Reese showed up at noon looking healthier than he had any right to. He found Eleanor in the break room. I heard about the hearing. Eleanor didn't look up from her lunch. Word travels. They're trying to fire you. They're trying. Doesn't mean they'll succeed. Eleanor, Victor, I appreciate your concern, but this isn't your fight. The hell it's not. He sat down across from her. You saved my life. Now I'm going to return the favor. She finally looked at him. How? By making sure the right people know who you are and what you've done. I don't want, I know what you want. But what you need is someone in your corner, and like it or not, that's me now. Eleanor studied him. Then she sighed. Do what you have to do. Victor smiled. Already did. 24 hours later, the hospital was flooded with calls. Reporters, veterans organizations, politicians, all of them asking the same question. Why is Redwood General investigating a decorated war hero? The board panicked. Kellerman held an emergency press conference. Tried to spin it as a routine review, but the damage was done. Eleanor's story went viral. Within 48 hours, she was national news. The nurse who saved a Navy SEAL. The colonel who'd walked away from glory to keep serving. The hospital's phones didn't stop ringing. Donations poured in, letters of support, threats of lawsuits. And in the midst of it all, the board made their decision. Eleanor was exonerated, fully, publicly. Cross was quietly reassigned. Vale was placed on probation. And Eleanor, unchanged, unbothered, went back to work. But the story wasn't over, because 2 days after the decision was announced, Eleanor received a package at her home. Inside was a single photograph, black and white, taken in Afghanistan 12 years ago. Eleanor stared at it, her breath catching. Because standing beside her in that photo, arm around her shoulders, smiling at the camera, was a young man she'd thought she'd never see again. A man who'd been declared dead. The photograph slipped from Eleanor's fingers and landed face up on the kitchen table. She stood frozen, staring at it, at him, at the ghost she'd buried 2 years ago. Captain James Torrance, 31, combat medic. The best field surgeon she'd ever trained. The man who'd pulled her out of a collapsing building in Kandahar and taken shrapnel to the spine doing it. The man whose name was on the memorial wall at Arlington. Dead. Officially. Conclusively. Except he wasn't. Eleanor's hands shook as she picked up the photograph again. Studied every detail. The background was unmistakable. Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. But the date stamped in the corner made her stomach drop. 3 weeks ago. She flipped the photo over. On the back, written in clean block letters, "They lied to you." Eleanor sank into the chair, her mind racing. Torrance had been killed in a drone strike. That's what they'd told her. That's what the report said. Classified mission. No body recovered. No questions asked. She'd mourned him, carried that weight alongside her son's death. 2 losses in 6 months. It had nearly broken her. Now, this. Her phone was in her hand before she realized she'd picked it up. She dialed Victor's number. It rang twice. "Eleanor, everything okay? I need to see you, now." A pause. "What happened?" "Not over the phone. Can you come to my apartment?" "Give me 20 minutes." She hung up, stared at the photograph, at Torrance's face, at the smile she remembered so well. If he was alive, why hadn't he reached out? Why stay hidden? And why send this now? The knock came 18 minutes later. Eleanor opened the door. Victor stood there, still moving carefully but looking stronger. "What's going on?" She handed him the photograph without a word. Victor studied it. His expression shifted from confusion to shock. "Who is this?" "Captain James Torrance. He served under me in Afghanistan, saved my life, was declared KYA 2 years ago. But this photo is dated 3 weeks ago." Victor looked up. "You're sure it's him?" "Positive." "Then someone faked his death, or he faked it himself." Eleanor crossed her arms. "Either way, I need to know why, and I need to know who sent this." Victor turned the photo over, read the message. "This wasn't mailed. No postage. Someone hand-delivered it." "I know. Which means they know where you live." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "I know that too." Victor pulled out his phone. "I'm making some calls. If Torrance is alive, there's a trail, and I'm going to find it." "Victor, don't argue with me on this. You saved my life. Now let me save yours." Eleanor watched him step outside, phone already to his ear, voice low and urgent. She closed the door, locked it, and went back to the kitchen. The photograph lay on the table, staring at her, accusing. She'd spent 2 years believing Torrance was dead, 2 years carrying that guilt. Because she'd sent him on that mission. She'd signed off on the operation. And when the report came back, KIA, no body recovered, she'd accepted it. But now everything was a lie. Yeah. Eleanor didn't sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the photograph, replaying every conversation she'd ever had with Torrance, looking for clues, for hints, for anything that made sense. Nothing did. By morning, her eyes burned and her coffee had gone cold. She showered, dressed, and drove to the hospital on autopilot. The shift started like any other. Patients arrived. Eleanor worked. But her mind was elsewhere, circling the same questions over and over. Daniel noticed. He found her in the supply room at noon, restocking IV bags with mechanical precision. "You look like hell." Eleanor didn't look up. "Thanks. I'm serious. What's going on?" "Nothing I can talk about." Daniel leaned against the doorframe. "Does this have anything to do with the package you got yesterday?" Eleanor's hand stilled. "How do you know about that?" "I saw Victor leaving your building last night. He looked like someone had punched him in the gut." Daniel stepped closer. "Whatever's happening, you don't have to deal with it alone." Eleanor met his gaze. He looked sincere, worried. It's complicated. Most things worth dealing with are. She almost smiled. Almost. Then her phone buzzed. A text from Victor. Found something. Meet me at Harlow's Diner. 7 p.m. Eleanor pocketed her phone. I have to go. Your shift doesn't end until 8. I'll make it work. She left before Daniel could argue. Harlow's Diner sat on the edge of Silvergate City, tucked between a pawn shop and a laundromat. The kind of place where nobody asked questions and the coffee was strong enough to strip paint. Eleanor arrived at 6:55 p.m. Victor was already there, seated in a back booth, 2 cups of coffee waiting. She slid in across from him. What did you find? Victor pushed a folder across the table. Torrance didn't die in that drone strike. He was pulled out, alive, barely. Classified evac to a black site medical facility in Germany. Eleanor opened the folder. Medical records, transfer orders, all stamped with classifications she recognized. Why fake his death? Because of what he knew. Victor leaned forward. 3 days before the drone strike, Torrance treated a high-value target. Afghan warlord. Guy was bleeding out. Torrance stabilized him, got him talking. And what he said... Victor paused. It implicated people. American people. Military contractors. Politicians. People who were supposed to be on our side. Eleanor's stomach twisted. He became a liability. Exactly. So they pulled him, patched him up, and buried him. Officially dead. Unofficially disappeared. Where is he now? I don't know. The trail goes cold after Germany. But someone wants you to know he's alive. Someone sent you that photo for a reason. Eleanor stared at the folder, at the proof, at the confirmation that everything she'd been told was a lie. Who? That's what we need to figure out. Victor pulled out another document. But there's more. The contractor company Torrance's intel would have exposed? Meridian Global. They do security work, black ops, wet work. And guess who's been handling their medical contracts for the past 5 years? Eleanor looked up. Redwood General. Victor nodded. Your hospital has been patching up mercenaries and keeping it quiet. And if Torrance comes forward, that whole arrangement falls apart. Eleanor's mind raced. The pieces were clicking into place. That's why Cross pushed so hard to get rid of me. That's why they tried to bury me in the investigation. They saw you as a threat, a decorated colonel with a combat record and a conscience. If you started asking questions, I'd find the truth. Eleanor closed the folder. Which means someone at the hospital knows Torrance is alive, and they're scared I'll find him. Victor's expression hardened. Eleanor, if these people are willing to fake a death and cover up war crimes, they won't hesitate to tie up loose ends. You need to be careful. I need to find Torrance. You need to stay alive. Eleanor met his gaze. Same thing. She left the diner at 7:45 p.m. and drove home through streets slick with rain. Her apartment felt colder than usual, emptier. She locked the door, checked the windows, and sat at the kitchen table with the folder Victor had given her. The medical records were detailed. Torrance had been in bad shape. Collapsed lung, fractured vertebrae, internal bleeding. But he'd survived, and someone had made sure he disappeared. Eleanor's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging. You won't like what you find. Her blood ran cold. She stared at the message, typed back. Who is this? No response. She set the phone down, heart pounding. Someone was watching her. Someone knew she was getting close. Another buzz, a photo this time. Eleanor opened it, her breath caught. It was her. Taken tonight. Outside the diner, talking to Victor. The message beneath it, last warning. Eleanor's hands shook. She closed the phone, set it face down on the table, and forced herself to breathe. Whoever sent this wanted her scared, wanted her to back off. But fear had stopped working on Eleanor a long time ago. She picked up her phone and texted Victor. They're watching us. Be careful. His response came immediately. Already figured that out. Stay inside tonight. Lock everything. I'll be in touch tomorrow. Eleanor set the phone down and went to the bedroom, pulled a locked case from the back of her closet. Inside was a Beretta M9. Military issue. She'd kept it after her discharge, filed all the proper paperwork, told herself it was just a precaution. Now she was glad she had. She checked the magazine, loaded, chambered around, set it on her nightstand. Then she lay down fully clothed, eyes on the door, and waited for morning. The next day started wrong. Eleanor arrived at the hospital at 5:58 a.m. and found security waiting at the entrance, 2 guards, both armed. "Miss Hale, you'll need to come with us." Eleanor's hand moved instinctively toward her bag. The Beretta was inside, tucked into a side pocket. "Why?" "Hospital administration wants to speak with you." "About what?" "They didn't say. Just told us to bring you up." Eleanor's mind raced. This was it. They knew she'd been in the records room. Knew she'd taken photos. Knew she was getting too close. She could run, but that would prove their suspicions. Better to play it out. See what cards they were holding. "Lead the way." They escorted her to the 4th floor, Kellerman's office. The door was closed. One of the guards knocked. "Come in." Eleanor stepped inside. Kellerman sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, expression unreadable. Cross stood in the corner, arms crossed. And beside the desk, a man Eleanor didn't recognize. Mid-50s, expensive suit, cold eyes. "Ms. Hale, have a seat." Eleanor remained standing. "I'm fine." Kellerman sighed. "This will go easier if you cooperate." "Cooperate with what?" The man in the suit spoke. His voice was smooth, corporate. "My name is Marcus Lyle. I'm general counsel for Meridian Global. I understand you've been asking questions about our relationship with this hospital." Eleanor's pulse quickened, but her face stayed calm. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? Because our security team has footage of you breaking into the records room yesterday, assaulting a guard, stealing confidential documents." "I didn't steal anything." "Your phone says otherwise." Lyle pulled out a tablet, tapped the screen. "We accessed your cloud backup this morning, found quite a few interesting photos, contract agreements, patient transfer logs, very sensitive material." Eleanor's stomach dropped. She'd been careless, uploaded everything automatically. Didn't think to disable the backup. Stupid. Lyle set down the tablet. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to delete those photos. All of them. You're going to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and you're going to resign from Redwood General, effective immediately." "And if I refuse?" "Then we press charges. Breaking and entering, assault, theft of confidential medical records. You'll lose your nursing license, probably spend some time in jail." Lyle leaned forward. "And that's just the beginning. We'll dig into your past, find things, make things. By the time we're done, your reputation will be destroyed." Eleanor's hands curled into fists. "You can't." "We can, and we will." Lyle's voice turned colder. "You were a good soldier, Ms. Hale. You followed orders, completed missions. But this isn't a war zone. You don't get to play hero here. You're just a nurse, and you're way out of your depth." Eleanor met his gaze, steady, unflinching. "I know what you're hiding, and I'm not backing down." Lyle smiled. "Then you've made your choice." He nodded to Kellerman. Kellerman pressed a button on his desk. 2 more security guards entered the room. "Escort Ms. Hale off the premises. She's no longer employed here." The guards moved toward Eleanor. She didn't resist, just turned and walked out, head high, spine straight. But inside, her mind was racing. They'd won this round, but the fight was far from over. Eleanor was escorted to her locker, given 5 minutes to collect her belongings, then walked out through the main entrance. Staff members watched from doorways and windows. Some looked sympathetic. Most just looked away. She got in her car and drove. No destination in mind, just drove. Her phone rang. Victor. "Eleanor. I heard what happened. Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "You're not fine. They fired you." "I'll survive." "Where are you?" "Driving." "Pull over. We need to talk." Eleanor found a parking lot. Killed the engine. "Talk." "I got a lead on Torrance. Friend of mine in naval intelligence traced some financial records. Guy matching Torrance's description has been moving around the Pacific Northwest for the past year. Last known location was Portland, 3 days ago. Portland's 4 hours from here." "I know. I'm already on the road." Meet me at the rest stop off I-5. 2 hours. Victor, don't argue. You need backup. And like it or not, I'm it. He hung up. Eleanor sat in the car, staring at the phone. Every instinct screamed that this was moving too fast, that she was being pushed into something, but she didn't have a choice. Torrance was the key. Find him, and everything else would unravel. She started the car and headed north. The rest stop was crowded. Families, truckers, people rushing to bathrooms and vending machines. Eleanor parked near the back, away from the main building. Victor's truck was already there. She walked over. He was leaning against the tailgate, arms crossed. You look terrible. Thanks. I'm serious. When's the last time you slept? Doesn't matter. Victor studied her. You can't keep running on fumes. You'll make mistakes. I'll sleep when this is over. Eleanor, I said I'll sleep when this is over. Her voice was sharp, final. Victor sighed. Fine. Here's what I know. Torrance has been using the name Jacob Marshall. Works as a paramedic, keeps a low profile, lives alone, no social media, pays cash for everything. How'd your contact find him? Blood type. Torrance has AB negative, rare. My contact flagged every blood donation and medical record in the Northwest for the past 2 years. Found a match in Portland. That's a hell of a long shot. It's all we've got. Eleanor nodded. Where in Portland? Southeast side, near the industrial district. I've got an address. Victor pulled out a piece of paper. But Eleanor, if we're doing this, we need to be smart. These people, Meridian, Lyle, whoever else is involved, they're not going to let Torrance just walk away. If we find him, we're putting a target on all our backs. I know. And you're okay with that? Eleanor met his gaze. I've had a target on my back since I put on a uniform. This isn't new. Victor handed her the address. Then let's go get him. They drove in separate vehicles. Safer that way. If one got caught, the other could still move. The address was in a rundown neighborhood on the edge of Portland. Cracked sidewalks, boarded windows. The kind of place where people minded their own business. The building was a 3-story walk-up. Brick, faded paint. Fire escape rusted but still intact. Eleanor parked 2 blocks away and walked. Victor followed 30 seconds later. Apartment 2C, second floor, end of the hall. Eleanor knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Torrance, it's Colonel Hale. Open the door. Silence. Victor tried the handle. Locked. He pulled out a small lock-pick set. Give me 30 seconds. He worked quickly. The lock clicked. The door swung open. The apartment was empty. Not just vacant. Stripped. No furniture. No personal items. Just bare walls and dusty floors. Eleanor stepped inside, scanning the space. He's gone. Looks like he cleared out in a hurry. Victor moved to the window. Fire escape's been used recently. Scuff marks on the sill. Eleanor checked the bedroom, the bathroom, the kitchen. Nothing. No clues, no evidence. Just an empty shell. She was about to leave when she noticed something. A piece of paper taped to the inside of the closet door. She pulled it down. An address. Handwritten. And a single word. Midnight. Eleanor showed it to Victor. This is tonight. It's a trap. Maybe, or maybe it's the only way we find him. Victor looked at the address. This is south of the city. Industrial Park. Abandoned warehouses. Perfect place for an ambush. Or a meeting. Eleanor folded the paper and pocketed it. Either way, we're going. Time. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Victor made calls, arranged backup. A couple of former SEAL buddies he trusted. Eleanor cleaned her Beretta, checked her ammo, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. By 11 p.m., they were on the road. The industrial park was 40 minutes south, dark, isolated. Exactly the kind of place where bad things happened. They parked a quarter-mile out and moved on foot. Victor's friends, 2 men named Carter and Mills, flanked them, rifles ready. All of them wore comms. All of them knew the risks. The warehouse was massive, rusted metal, broken windows. The address matched. Eleanor checked her watch. 11:55 p.m. We go in together, Victor said. Stay close. Watch the corners. If this goes south, we fall back to the vehicles. Eleanor nodded, chambered around. Let's go. They moved toward the entrance. A side door hung open, creaking in the wind. Eleanor stepped inside first. The interior was cavernous, empty. Moonlight filtered through the broken roof, casting long shadows. "Torrance!" Eleanor's voice echoed. "I know you're here!" Nothing. She moved deeper into the warehouse. Victor and the others spread out, covering angles, then footsteps. From above. The catwalk. A figure emerged from the shadows. Tall, lean, moving with a slight limp. Eleanor's breath caught. "James?" The figure stopped, raised both hands. "Colonel." It was him. Torrance. Older, worn, but alive. Eleanor lowered her weapon. "We need to talk." "Not here." Torrance gestured toward the far end of the warehouse. "Follow me. And tell your friends to lower their guns. We're not alone." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "I mean you were followed. And in about 30 seconds, this place is going to be a war zone." As if on cue, the main doors exploded inward. Flashlights, tactical gear. A dozen figures poured in, weapons raised. A voice boomed through a megaphone. "Eleanor Hale, James Torrance, you're surrounded. Drop your weapons and come out with your hands up." Eleanor looked at Torrance. "Who are they?" "Meridian. They've been tracking me for months. You led them right to me." "I didn't." "Doesn't matter now." Torrance pulled a pistol from his waistband. "We fight or we die. Your call, Colonel." Eleanor's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, trapped. But she'd been in worse situations, and she'd survived. She looked at Victor, at Carter and Mills, at Torrance. Then she raised her weapon and said the only thing that made sense. "We fight." The first shot cracked through the air, then another, then chaos. Eleanor dove behind a stack of crates as bullets tore through the space where she'd been standing. Victor returned fire, dropping one of the Meridian operatives. Carter and Mills laid down suppressing fire, forcing the others to take cover. Torrance moved like a ghost, fast, efficient. He took out 2 more operatives before disappearing into the shadows. "Fall back," Victor shouted. "We can't hold this position." Eleanor fired 3 more rounds, then ran. The group moved toward the back of the warehouse, bullets chasing them every step. They reached a loading dock. A rusted truck sat nearby, tires flat but still providing cover. "There," Eleanor pointed, "behind the truck." They scrambled behind it just as another volley of gunfire tore through the air. Victor checked his magazine. "I'm down to 6 rounds. 4, Carter said. Mills didn't answer. He was slumped against the truck, blood spreading across his chest. Eleanor dropped beside him, checked the wound. Entry wound just below the clavicle. Exit wound through the back. He was drowning in his own blood. "Stay with me," Eleanor said. "You're going to be fine." Mills coughed. Blood speckled his lips. "Lying doesn't suit you, Colonel." He went limp. Eleanor closed his eyes, jaw tight. Then she stood and fired twice into the darkness. Both shots found targets. "We need to move," Torrance said. "There's a drainage tunnel on the east side. Leads to the river. It's our only shot." "How do you know?" "Because I've been planning my escape from this place for 3 months. Now move." They ran, Eleanor, Victor, Carter, and Torrance. Bullets snapped past them. One grazed Eleanor's shoulder. She barely felt it, just kept running. They reached the tunnel entrance, a rusted grate half buried in concrete. Torrance kicked it open. "Go!" Carter went first, then Victor. Eleanor turned to cover them and saw a figure step out of the shadows. A woman, mid-40s, short hair, tactical vest, gun raised. The same woman from the diner, from the pier in Eleanor's nightmares. Except this time she was real, and she was aiming directly at Torrance. Eleanor didn't think, just moved, threw herself between them. The gunshot was deafening. Eleanor felt the impact, her chest, center mass. She went down hard, gasping. Torrance fired. Once, twice. The woman dropped. Then he was beside Eleanor, hands on her chest, applying pressure. "No, no, 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 stay with me, Colonel, stay with me." Eleanor's vision blurred. She tasted copper. Her breath came in shallow gasps. "James, don't talk. Save your strength. Listen." Blood bubbled at the corner of her mouth. "The photos. My phone. Cloud backup. Get it. Expose them." "I will." I promise. Just stay with me. Eleanor's hand found his, squeezed. Make it count. Her vision darkened, the pain faded, and the last thing she heard was Torrance screaming her name. Eleanor's eyes snapped open to blinding white light and the steady beep of a cardiac monitor. She gasped. Pain exploded across her chest. Her lungs burned. Every breath felt like broken glass scraping tissue. Easy. Don't move. A voice. Male. Familiar. She turned her head. Torrance sat beside the bed, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Stubble covered his jaw. His eyes were bloodshot. Where? Eleanor's voice came out as a rasp. Safe house. Victor's contact owns it. We're 2 hours north of Portland. Torrance leaned forward. You've been out for 36 hours. The bullet hit your vest, cracked 3 ribs, bruised your sternum. You're lucky to be alive. Eleanor tried to sit up. Pain lanced through her torso. She fell back, gasping. I said don't move. Torrance pressed a hand gently to her shoulder. You need rest. Mills? Torrance's expression darkened. Didn't make it. We buried him this morning. Eleanor closed her eyes. Another loss. Another name to add to the list. Victor? Carter? Alive. Banged up, but functional. Torrance stood, moved to the window. We got out through the drainage tunnel. Made it to the river. Stole a boat. Been moving ever since. Meridian? Still hunting us, but we bought some time. He turned back to her. Your phone, the cloud backup. I accessed it, downloaded everything. Eleanor's pulse quickened. And? It's worse than we thought. Meridian's been using Redwood General as a black site for over 5 years, patching up mercenaries, hiding casualties, falsifying records, and the money trail. He shook his head. It goes all the way up. Hospital board, city officials, state legislators, everyone's dirty. We need to go public. Already did. Torrance pulled out a laptop, set it on the bed beside her. I sent everything to 3 journalists. People I trust. Former military. They've been sitting on stories about Meridian for years but never had proof. Now they do. He opened the laptop, pulled up a news site. The headline hit Eleanor like a freight train. Redwood General Hospital linked to illegal black ops contractor. Below it, a subheading. Decorated Army colonel nearly killed. Trying to expose conspiracy. Eleanor's hands shook as she scrolled. Photos of the contracts, patient records with names redacted but patterns clear, financial statements showing millions in payments. And at the center of it all, a photo of her, taken from her military service file. It broke 4 hours ago, Torrance said. National coverage. FBI's already opened an investigation. Meridian's stock tanked, and Redwood General is under federal lockdown. Eleanor stared at the screen, at the faces of the people she'd worked alongside. Cross, Vale, Kellerman, all of them listed as persons of interest. They're done, Torrance said quietly. You did it. But Eleanor didn't feel victorious. She felt hollow. Because people had died for this. Mills. The woman at the warehouse. Maybe others she didn't know about yet. What about Lyle? Torrance's jaw tightened. In the wind. Disappeared the moment the story broke, but they'll find him. Men like that always leave a trail. Eleanor closed the laptop, leaned back against the pillows. How long until I can move? A week. Maybe less if you're careful. I need to get back to Silvergate. No, you need to heal. James, I'm not arguing with you on this. His voice was firm. You took a bullet for me, nearly died, again. So for once in your life, just sit still and let someone else handle it. Eleanor wanted to argue, but the exhaustion was overwhelming. Her eyelids felt like lead. Fine. 1 week. Good. Torrance stood. I'll be back in a few hours. Victor's outside if you need anything. He left. Eleanor lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the monitor's steady beep. 1 week. Then she'd finish this. The next 3 days passed in a blur of pain and frustration. Eleanor could barely walk without gasping. Every movement sent fire through her ribs, but she pushed through it, did laps around the safe house, forced herself to eat, rebuilt her strength one painful step at a time. Victor kept her updated. The FBI had raided Redwood General, seized records, arrested Kellerman and 3 board members. Cross had lawyered up immediately. Vale had fled to his cabin in Montana and was refusing to come out. "They're tearing the whole thing apart," Victor said, sitting across from Eleanor at the small kitchen table. "Every contract, every payment, every patient Meridian brought in, it's going to take months to untangle." "What about the staff, the nurses, the doctors who weren't involved?" "Most of them are cooperating, giving statements. A few are claiming they didn't know what was happening." Victor shrugged. "Maybe some of them really didn't, hard to say." Eleanor thought about Angela, about Daniel, about all the people who'd just been doing their jobs, unaware of what was happening in the shadows. "Daniel," she asked, "gave a statement yesterday, told them everything he knew, which wasn't much, but he vouched for you, said you were the only one who seemed to care about doing the right thing." Eleanor's chest tightened, not from pain, from something else. "What about Torrance? Has the military responded?" Victor's expression darkened. "That's complicated. Officially, he's still KIA. They can't just reverse that without an investigation, and an investigation means answering questions they don't want to answer. So they're going to bury him again. They're going to try. But the story's out now. People are asking why a decorated medic was declared dead when he wasn't, why his intel was suppressed, why no one looked for him." Victor leaned forward. "It's going to get messy, but it's also going to force accountability." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Good." Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She opened it. A photo. Black and white. Surveillance footage, timestamped 2 hours ago. It showed Daniel leaving the FBI field office in Silvergate City. A man in a suit walked beside him. The angle was wrong to see the man's face, but something about his posture made Eleanor's stomach drop. Below the photo, "Your friend talks too much. Shame if something happened to him." Eleanor's blood ran cold. She showed Victor. His face hardened. "They're threatening him. They're trying to scare us, make us back off." "Is it working?" Eleanor looked at the photo again, at Daniel's face, unaware he was being watched. "No, it's making me angry." She stood, ignoring the protest from her ribs. "I need to make a call." Eleanor dialed Daniel's number. It rang 4 times before he picked up. "Eleanor, Jesus, are you okay? I heard you were shot." "I'm fine. Listen to me carefully. You're being watched." Silence. Then quietly, "What?" "Meridian has people tracking you. I just got a photo. They're threatening you to get to me." Eleanor, I didn't tell them anything sensitive, just what I saw, what everyone saw." "I know, but they don't care. You're leveraged now." Eleanor's grip tightened on the phone. "You need to disappear for a while. Go somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't think to look." "I can't just disappear. I have patients, responsibilities. You'll have nothing if you're dead." Her voice was sharp, final. "Daniel, please, trust me on this." A long pause, then, "Okay, I'll figure something out. My sister lives in Colorado. I can go there." "Good. Don't tell anyone else where you're going. Not colleagues, not friends, no one." "Understood. And Daniel, thank you for standing up for me." His voice softened. "You would have done the same." Eleanor hung up, turned to Victor. "We need to move faster. They're escalating." "Agreed. But you're still recovering. You can't." "I can, and I will." She walked to the window, looked out at the trees. "Torrance said Lyle disappeared. What if he didn't run? What if he's coordinating this, trying to clean up loose ends before the investigation closes in?" Victor considered that. It would make sense. He's got the most to lose. If Daniel testifies, if you testify, the whole thing unravels. Then we need to find Lyle, fast. "And how do you propose we do that? The FBI's been looking for him for days." Eleanor turned back to him. "The FBI is looking for a man on the run. We're looking for a man trying to finish something. Different strategies, different places to look." Victor raised an eyebrow. "You have an idea?" "Maybe. Torrance said the money trail goes all the way up. That means Lyle has connections. People protecting him, people who need him alive to keep their own secrets buried." "So we find the people protecting him." "Exactly." Victor stood. "I'll make some calls, see if any of my contacts have heard chatter." He left. Eleanor stood alone, staring at her reflection in the window. She looked like hell, pale, drawn, but her eyes were sharp, focused. She wasn't done yet, not even close. On the fourth day, Eleanor walked outside for the first time. The safe house sat on 10 acres of wooded land, isolated and quiet. The air was crisp, clean. It smelled like pine and rain. Torrance found her sitting on the porch steps, staring at the tree line. "You're supposed to be resting." "I am resting, just doing it out here." He sat beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Eleanor said, "Why didn't you reach out? When you were still alive? Why stay hidden?" Torrance was quiet for a long time. "Because I was scared. Not of Meridian, of what I'd become." He looked at his hands. "After Germany, after they patched me up and told me I had to disappear, I wasn't the same, the things I'd seen, the things I'd learned. I didn't know who to trust anymore." "You could have trusted me." "Could I?" He met her gaze. "You were still in the system, still following orders. If I'd reached out, you would have reported it, done your duty, and I'd be dead for real this time." Eleanor wanted to argue, but he was right. 2 years ago, she would have reported it, followed protocol, let the machine handle it. Now she wasn't so sure. "I'm sorry," Torrance said quietly, "for putting you through that, for letting you think I was dead. You did what you had to do. So did you, and look where it got us." Eleanor almost smiled. "Still alive, that counts for something." "Yeah, it does." They sat in silence, watching the trees sway in the wind. Then Torrance said, "There's something else you need to know. About your son." Eleanor's body went rigid. "What about him?" Torrance pulled out a folded piece of paper, handed it to her. "I found this in the files. Didn't know if I should show you, but you deserve the truth." Eleanor unfolded it. It was a medical report. "Andrew Hale, Marine Sergeant, wounded in action, medevac to a Meridian facility in Kandahar. Initial prognosis? Stable. Treatable." Then the orders. Flagged by someone high up. Authorization denied. Treatment suspended. Patient expired. Eleanor's hands shook. She read it again, then again. "They let him die," she whispered. "I'm sorry. They could have saved him. He was stable, treatable, and they just—" Her voice broke. Torrance put a hand on her shoulder. "I know." Eleanor stared at the report, at the cold clinical language that described her son's last moments, at the signature at the bottom, someone she didn't recognize. "Who gave the order?" Her voice was barely audible. "I don't know. The signature's illegible, but it came from someone with authority. Military or contractor, high level." Eleanor folded the report, tucked it into her pocket. "I'm going to find out who." "Eleanor, I'm going to find out who killed my son, and I'm going to make them answer for it." Torrance looked at her, at the cold fury in her eyes. "Then I'm with you, whatever it takes." By the 6th day, Eleanor was moving without wincing. The pain was still there, sharp and persistent, but manageable. She'd regained enough strength to think clearly, to plan. Victor came in that evening with news. Lyle surfaced, not the Bahamas, Dubai. One of my contacts spotted him at a luxury hotel, traveling under a fake name. But it's him. Dubai doesn't extradite. Not to the US, no. But they're not fans of people who make international news for the wrong reasons. If we can get proof he's there, we can apply pressure through back channels. Or we can go get him ourselves. Victor stared at her. "That's insane." "Maybe, but it's also the only way we guarantee he doesn't disappear again. Eleanor, you can barely walk without pain. You want to fly halfway around the world and kidnap a man protected by God knows who?" "Yes." Victor looked at Torrance. "Talk some sense into her." Torrance shrugged. "She's right. Lyle's the linchpin. Get him, and everything else falls apart. People start talking. Deals get made. The truth comes out. And if we get caught, then we get caught." Eleanor's voice was calm, final. "But I'm not letting him walk away. Not after what he's done. Not after what he took from me." Victor rubbed his face, sighed. "You're both crazy." "Probably. You in?" He looked between them, then laughed. bitter, exhausted. Yeah, I'm in. But we do this smart. No cowboy moves. We plan every step, and if it goes bad, we pull out. Agreed? Eleanor nodded. Agreed. They spent the next 2 days planning. Carter had contacts in Dubai, former military, working private security, people who could provide equipment, intel, and most importantly, an exit strategy. The plan was simple. Locate Lyle, confirm his identity, extract him to a neutral location, then hand him over to authorities who'd actually prosecute. Simple, but not easy. They flew out on the 8th day. Commercial flights, separate bookings. Eleanor traveled under a fake name, paperwork Victor had arranged through channels she didn't ask about. Dubai was a shock to the system. Heat, noise, glass towers stretching into a hazy sky. Eleanor moved through the airport with her head down, every sense on alert. Carter met them at a safe house in the old district, smaller than the one in Oregon. Cramped, but secure. Lyle's at the Meridian Tower Hotel, Carter said, spreading a map across the table. Penthouse suite, 14th floor. Building has security, cameras, keycard access. Getting in won't be easy. What about getting out? Torrance asked. Even harder. But I've got a guy who works maintenance. He can get us access to the service elevator. We grab Lyle, take him down to the parking garage, and drive straight to the port. I've got a boat waiting. Victor frowned. And once we're on the water, we head to international waters. Transfer him to a U.S. vessel. Navy's got a destroyer group operating in the region. They'll take custody. Eleanor studied the map. What's the window? Lyle's got a dinner meeting tomorrow night, 8 p.m. He'll be out of the suite for at least 2 hours. That's when we move. Security. 2 guards, lobby and 14th floor, both armed, but they're not expecting trouble. Lyle thinks he's safe here. Eleanor looked up. He's wrong. The next evening, Eleanor dressed in maintenance coveralls, a baseball cap pulled low over her face. Torrance and Victor did the same. They moved through the hotel like ghosts. Carter's contact had disabled the cameras on a 20-minute loop. Enough time to get in, grab Lyle, and get out. The service elevator was empty. They rode it to the 14th floor in silence. The doors opened. Eleanor stepped out first, scanning the hallway. One guard at the end, reading his phone, not paying attention. Eleanor walked toward him, casual, confident. The guard looked up at the last second. She hit him. Hard. A throat strike followed by a knee to the solar plexus. He went down without a sound. Torrance zip-tied his hands, gagged him, dragged him into a utility closet. They moved to the penthouse suite. Eleanor picked the lock in under 30 seconds. The door clicked open. The suite was obscene. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and sitting at a desk by the window, typing on a laptop, was Marcus Lyle. He didn't hear them enter, not until Eleanor cleared her throat. Lyle spun. His face went white. You... surprised? Eleanor stepped into the light. Lyle's hand moved toward a drawer. Victor raised his weapon. Don't. Lyle froze, slowly raised his hands. You can't do this. You have no authority here. No jurisdiction. Don't need it. Eleanor walked closer. You're coming with us. Voluntarily or not. Your choice. You're making a mistake. I have friends, powerful people. They'll come for you. Let them. Eleanor's voice was ice. Stand up. Lyle didn't move. What do you want? Money? I can pay you. More than you've ever seen. Enough to disappear. Start over. I don't want your money. Then what? Justice. Lyle laughed, bitter, desperate. There's no such thing. Not in this world. You should know that better than anyone. Eleanor grabbed him by the collar, hauled him to his feet. Move. They zip-tied his hands, gagged him. Torrance grabbed the laptop. They moved back to the service elevator. The ride down was tense. Lyle struggled. Eleanor pressed the Beretta against his ribs. Stop. He stopped. The elevator opened on the parking level. Carter was waiting with a van. Go, go, go! They shoved Lyle inside. Carter hit the gas. The van screeched out of the garage and into the night. Behind them, alarms started blaring. Bolt. The drive to the port took 15 minutes. Every second felt like an hour. Eleanor kept the gun on Lyle, who sat slumped in the back, eyes darting between them. "You're all dead," he said around the gag. "You know that, right? Dead." Eleanor didn't respond. They reached the port. The boat was exactly where Carter said it would be. Small, fast, unmarked. They dragged Lyle aboard. Carter started the engine. The boat roared to life and pulled away from the dock. 5 minutes later, flashing lights appeared behind them. Port Authority. Moving fast. "They're not going to catch us," Carter said. "Hold on." He opened the throttle. The boat surged forward, cutting through the water like a knife. Eleanor looked back. The lights were falling behind, fading. They'd done it. Quotes. 2 hours later, they were in international waters. The U.S. destroyer loomed ahead, a gray shadow against the black sky. They pulled alongside. A boarding ladder dropped. Navy personnel descended. Eleanor handed Lyle over without a word, watched as they hauled him up onto the deck. A captain met them at the top. "Colonel Hale, we've been expecting you." "He's all yours." The captain nodded. "The FBI will take custody once we reach port. You'll need to give a statement." "I know the drill." She turned to leave. The captain called after her. "Colonel, for what it's worth, what you did took guts. A lot of people are grateful." Eleanor didn't respond, just climbed back down to the boat. They returned to the U.S. 3 days later. Flew commercial. No fanfare, no press. But the story was everywhere. Lyle's capture, his extradition, the evidence mounting against him. Meridian Global was finished. Cross, Kellerman, and 4 others were indicted on federal charges. Conspiracy, fraud, obstruction of justice. Vale's body was found in his cabin. Self-inflicted gunshot wound. A note beside him that said only, "I'm sorry." Eleanor didn't feel sorry for him. Redwood General was shut down, restructured, every administrator replaced. The hospital reopened 6 months later with a new name, new leadership, and a memorial plaque in the lobby in memory of those who served and were failed by the system. Eleanor stood in front of it on the day of the reopening. Read the names: Andrew Hale, James Mills, others she didn't know. Daniel found her there. "They asked me to speak at the ceremony. I said no." Eleanor glanced at him. "Why?" "Because the only person who should be speaking is you." "I'm not interested in speeches." "I know, but people need to hear from you, need to know what you did, what you sacrificed." Eleanor looked back at the plaque. "I didn't do it for recognition." "I know, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve it." The congressional hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Eleanor testified for 6 hours, told them everything: the evidence, the cover-ups, Andrew's death. When she mentioned her son, the room went silent. Senator Greer leaned forward, her expression grim. "Do you know who gave the order to deny treatment?" "No, the signature was illegible, but I intend to find out." "This committee will assist in that effort. You have my word." Eleanor nodded. "Thank you." After the hearing, Torrance was called to testify. He told his story: the ambush, the fake death, the years in hiding. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Greer gavelled it down. "Captain Torrance, on behalf of this committee and the United States government, I want to apologize. What happened to you was unconscionable, and we will work to ensure it never happens again." Torrance's jaw tightened. "With respect, Senator, I've heard promises before. I'll believe it when I see it." Greer smiled. Sad. "Fair enough." 3 months later, Eleanor received a letter. Official, sealed. She opened it in her apartment, hand steady. Inside was a single page. A presidential commendation for exceptional service, for courage in the face of corruption, for refusing to stay silent. Eleanor read it twice, then folded it and tucked it into a drawer. It didn't bring Andrew back, didn't erase the pain, but it was something. That night she got a call from Torrance. They found him. Eleanor's heart stopped. Who? The person who gave the order to let Andrew die. Who was it? A pause. "You're not going to like this. Tell me." Brigadier General Raymond Hess, Retired. He was overseeing Meridian's contracts in Afghanistan at the time. Your son's unit stumbled onto something they weren't supposed to see. Hess made the call to eliminate the problem. Andrew was collateral damage. Eleanor's grip tightened on the phone. Where is he now? Virginia, living in a gated community, pension, benefits. Playing golf 3 times a week. Eleanor closed her eyes. Send me the address. Eleanor, send me the address. James? Silence. Then, already did. Check your email. She hung up, opened her laptop, found the email, read the address. Then she stood, grabbed her coat, and walked out the door. Holtz. Eleanor arrived at the gated community the next morning. Security waved her through. She'd called ahead, claimed to be a journalist writing a book on military leadership. Hess's house was at the end of a cul-de-sac. Large, expensive, paid for with blood money. She knocked. The door opened. A man in his 60s stood there. Trim, gray hair, confident smile. Can I help you? General Hess? That's me. You must be the journalist. Come in. Eleanor stepped inside. The house was immaculate. Photos on the walls, awards, commendations. Hess led her to the living room, gestured to a chair. Coffee? No, thank you. He sat across from her. So, what's this book about? Eleanor met his gaze. It's about my son, Marine Sergeant Andrew Hale. You killed him. Hess's smile vanished. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Eleanor pulled out a folder, set it on the table. Medical records, orders, your signature. You denied him treatment because he was inconvenient. Because saving him would have raised questions. Hess stared at the folder. His face had gone pale. You need to leave. Not until you answer for what you did. I don't have to answer to you. Eleanor stood, leaned over him. My son was 24 years old. He had his whole life ahead of him. And you took that away because it was easier than doing the right thing. It was war. People die in war. He didn't die in war. He died because of you. Her voice was cold, controlled, and now the world's going to know it. Hess shot to his feet. You can't prove anything. That signature could be anyone's. Handwriting analysis says otherwise. So does testimony from 3 people who were in the room when you gave the order. Eleanor stepped back. The FBI's opening an investigation. You'll be indicted within the month, and when you go to trial, I'll be there, every single day, making sure you can't hide. Hess's hands shook. Get out of my house. Gladly. Eleanor turned and walked out. Didn't look back. Behind her, Hess sank into his chair, his world collapsing around him. 2 weeks later, Eleanor stood in front of Andrew's grave. The headstone was simple, clean. She set down a bouquet of flowers, knelt in the grass. I got him, she whispered. The man who killed you. He's going to pay. I promise. The wind rustled through the trees. Eleanor closed her eyes, let herself feel the grief, the loss, the weight of 2 years spent carrying a lie. Then she stood, wiped her eyes, and walked away, because the fight wasn't over. It never would be. But for the first time in a long time, Eleanor Hale felt like she could breathe. That night, she returned to her apartment to find another envelope on the floor. No postage, no return address. Her blood ran cold. She picked it up, opened it. Inside was a photograph, black and white, recent. It showed General Hess standing outside his house, the same house Eleanor had visited. But the photo was taken yesterday, after she'd left. On the back, written in those same block letters, he wasn't working alone. Eleanor stared at the photo, at the message, and realized the truth. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. Eleanor called Torrance before her hands stopped shaking. Someone's still watching. Someone knew I went to Hess's house. I'm on my way. Don't open the door for anyone. He arrived 20 minutes later with Victor. Eleanor showed them the photograph. Torrance studied it, his expression darkening. This was taken from across the street, professional angle, good equipment. Hess has protection, Victor said. Someone making sure he doesn't talk. Eleanor paced the small living room. He said he wasn't working alone. He's right. There's a network. People who benefited from keeping Meridian's operations quiet. Then we find them. Torrance set down the photo. All of them. How? We exposed Meridian, shut down the hospital, got Lyle arrested, and they're still operating. Because we cut off the branches, not the root. Victor pulled out his phone. I've got a contact at Treasury, someone who tracks financial crimes. If there's money moving, she can find it. Do it. Victor stepped outside to make the call. Eleanor and Torrance stood in silence. You should leave the country, Torrance said finally. Disappear for a while. Let this die down. I'm not running. Eleanor, I didn't run when they tried to fire me, didn't run when they shot at me in that warehouse. I'm not starting now. Torrance looked at her, at the stubborn set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes. You're going to get yourself killed. Maybe, but at least I'll die standing up. Victor came back inside. My contact can see us tomorrow, DC 9 a.m. Eleanor nodded. Book the flights. They flew out at dawn, commercial, separate seats. Eleanor spent the flight staring out the window, watching the sun rise over a country that had taken everything from her and given nothing back. The Treasury building was imposing. Gray stone, heavy security. They cleared 3 checkpoints before reaching the office of Sarah Mendez, a senior analyst with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. Victor told me what you need. Mendez gestured to chairs. I've been tracking Meridian's finances for 2 years, ever since rumors started about off-book operations. But every time I got close, the trail went cold. Someone's protecting them, Eleanor said. Multiple someones. I've identified at least 7 shell companies funneling money, payments to contractors, offshore accounts. It's sophisticated, layered, designed to hide the source. Can you trace it? Mendez smiled. Thin. I already did. Took me 6 months and a few favors I probably shouldn't have called in, but I found the origin point. She pulled up a screen. A complex web of transactions, numbers and dates flowing like water. All roads lead here. She tapped a name at the center. Vanguard Solutions. Defense contractor. Based in Virginia. They've been bankrolling Meridian's operations since the beginning, paying off officials, funding black sites, keeping everything quiet. Eleanor leaned forward. Who runs Vanguard? Mendez pulled up another file. A photo appeared. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. The man in the photo was in his 70s. Silver hair, cold eyes, a face she'd seen before, on television and newspapers, at military functions, Senator William Granger, chairman of the Armed Services Committee. No, Eleanor whispered. Yes. Mendez's voice was grim. Granger's been using his position to funnel contracts to Vanguard for over a decade, and Vanguard's been using that money to finance Meridian's operations. It's a closed loop, money and power feeding each other. Victor cursed under his breath. Granger's untouchable. He's got connections everywhere, DOD, CIA, White House. No one's untouchable. Eleanor's voice was cold. Final. Not anymore. Mendez handed her a USB drive. Everything's on here, financial records, communications, enough to bury him. But you need to be careful. Men like Granger don't go down quietly. Eleanor pocketed the drive. Neither do I. They left the Treasury building and regrouped at a hotel near the Capitol. Eleanor plugged in the USB drive and started reviewing files. Hours of data, thousands of transactions, all pointing back to Granger. He's been doing this for years, Torrance said, reading over her shoulder. Skimming money, covering up casualties, protecting Meridian because they made him rich. And he had people killed to keep it quiet. Eleanor's hands curled into fists. Including my son. Victor sat down across from her. So what's the play? We can't just walk into the Senate and accuse him. He'll deny everything, claim the evidence is fabricated. Then we don't give him the chance to deny it. Eleanor looked up. We go public. Release everything, every file, every transaction. Let the world see what he's done. That'll start a firestorm. Good. Let it burn. Torrance hesitated. Eleanor, if we do this, there's no going back. Granger will come after us with everything he's got. Legal, illegal, doesn't matter. He's already coming after us. This just forces his hand. Victor nodded slowly. Then we do it smart. Send the files to multiple outlets simultaneously. Print, online, international. Make it impossible to suppress. And we do it tonight, Eleanor stood, before he knows we have them. They worked through the afternoon, compiling the evidence into a single, devastating package. Financial records, emails, recorded phone calls Mendez had obtained through classified channels, all of it pointing directly at Granger. By evening, they were ready. Eleanor sat at the laptop, hands hovering over the keyboard. "Once I send this, it's over," she said quietly. "No more hiding, no more waiting." "Then send it." Torrance's hand rested on her shoulder. "Finish what you started." Eleanor hit send. The files went out to 15 different journalists, major newspapers, cable news, international outlets, all of them vetted, all of them hungry for the story. Within an hour, the first article broke. Senator Granger linked to illegal military contractor scheme. Then another. Vanguard Solutions funded Black Ops cover-up, and another. Decorated Colonel exposes decades-long conspiracy. Eleanor watched the headlines multiply, watched the story spread like wildfire across every platform, watched as the edifice Granger had built over decades began to crumble. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. "Colonel Hale." The voice was smooth, controlled, dangerous. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Eleanor's grip tightened. "Senator Granger, you've made a grave mistake. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? A criminal, a coward, a man who let my son die to protect his bank account." Silence. Then, coldly, "Your son was collateral damage, nothing personal." Eleanor's vision blurred red. "It was personal to me." "Then you should have let it go, but you didn't, and now you're going to pay for that mistake." "I'm already paying. Have been for 2 years. The difference is now you're paying too." "We'll see about that." The line went dead. Eleanor set down the phone. Her hands were steady, her breathing even. Torrance looked at her. "He's going to fight back." "Let him." Ngwats. The fight came faster than expected. By morning, Granger had mobilized his network. Lawyers filed emergency injunctions trying to block the story. Friendly media outlets ran counter-narratives questioning the evidence. Political allies went on television defending him. But it wasn't enough. The evidence was too strong, too detailed, too damning. By noon, the FBI announced an investigation. The Justice Department followed an hour later. By evening, 3 senators called for Granger's resignation. Eleanor watched it unfold from the hotel room, exhausted but awake. Victor had gone out for food. Torrance sat beside her, monitoring news feeds. "They're tearing him apart," he said. "Good. Some people are defending him, saying this is a political hit job. Let them. The evidence speaks for itself." Torrance glanced at her. "How are you holding up?" Eleanor didn't answer immediately. She stared at the screen, at Granger's face on every channel, at the panic in his eyes during a hastily called press conference. "I'm tired," she said finally, "but I'm not done." The hearings began 2 weeks later. Eleanor was subpoenaed to testify. She arrived at the Capitol building to find it surrounded by reporters and protesters. Some held signs supporting her. Others called her a traitor. She walked through them all without looking left or right. The hearing room was packed. Senators, lawyers, journalists, and sitting at the defendant's table, flanked by attorneys, was William Granger. He looked smaller in person, older, less imposing. Eleanor took her seat at the witness table. The chairman, a senator named Barbara Cole, gavelled the room to order. "Colonel Hale, thank you for being here. Please state your name for the record." "Eleanor Hale, Colonel, United States Army, retired." "You've submitted extensive evidence regarding Senator Granger's involvement with Vanguard Solutions and Meridian Global. Can you walk us through what you discovered?" Eleanor did, for 3 hours. She laid out the financial connections, the cover-ups, the deaths, Andrew's file, every piece falling into place like a puzzle. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Granger's lawyer stood. "Senator Granger denies these allegations completely. The so-called evidence has been taken out of context and misrepresented." "Then explain this." Eleanor pulled out a document, handed it to Cole. A payment authorization signed by Senator Granger, $2 million to Meridian Global, dated 3 days after my son was killed, labeled Operational expenses. Granger's face went white. The lawyer scrambled. That proves nothing. Operational expenses could mean anything. It means you paid them to cover it up. Eleanor's voice cut through the room like a blade. My son's death, Torrance's disappearance, every casualty Meridian wanted hidden. You paid for all of it. Granger shot to his feet. That's a lie. Is it? Eleanor stood. Because I have emails, phone records, testimonies from people who worked for you, all of them saying the same thing. You knew what Meridian was doing. You approved it. You profited from it. Granger's lawyer pulled him back down, whispered urgently in his ear. Cole leaned forward. Senator Granger, do you wish to respond? Granger stared at Eleanor, at the woman who'd destroyed him. Then he said, voice shaking, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The room erupted. The trial lasted 3 months. Eleanor attended every day, sat in the gallery, watched as witness after witness took the stand, each one adding another nail to Granger's coffin. Torrance testified, told the story of his fake death, the orders that came from above, the cover-up that followed. Mendez testified, walked the jury through the financial trail, showed them how money flowed from Granger to Vanguard to Meridian and back again. Daniel testified, described the hostile environment at Redwood General, the pressure to stay quiet, the culture of fear. And finally, Eleanor testified again. This time, she read Andrew's medical file aloud. Every word, every detail, every cold clinical note that described how her son had been left to die. When she finished, several jurors were crying. The defense had nothing. They tried to attack the evidence, questioned the witness's credibility, suggested Eleanor had fabricated everything out of grief and revenge. But the jury didn't buy it. On the final day, after 4 hours of deliberation, they returned with a verdict, guilty on all counts. Granger collapsed in his chair. His lawyers surrounded him. The room exploded with noise. Eleanor stood, walked out, didn't look back. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Granger received 30 years. No possibility of parole. His assets were seized. His reputation destroyed. Vanguard Solutions was dissolved. Its executives indicted. The entire operation dismantled piece by piece. General Hess was convicted on related charges. Conspiracy. Obstruction. Accessory to murder. He got 25 years. Cross and Kellerman both took plea deals, testified against others in exchange for reduced sentences. They'd served time. Not enough, but something. Redwood General was restructured completely. New board, new administration, new policies, and a memorial fund established in Andrew's name to support veterans and their families. Eleanor stood at the courthouse steps after the sentencing, facing a wall of cameras and reporters. Colonel Hale, how does it feel to finally get justice? Do you have any message for other whistleblowers? What are you going to do now? Eleanor held up a hand. The noise died. 2 years ago, I took a job as a nurse because I wanted to keep serving. I was mocked, dismissed, told I didn't belong. And when I tried to do the right thing, they tried to destroy me. She paused. Let that sink in. But they didn't, because the truth is stronger than any lie. And justice, real justice, doesn't care about power or money or connections. It cares about what's right. She looked directly into the cameras. To anyone out there who's being silenced, who's being told to sit down and shut up, who's being punished for speaking out, don't stop, don't back down. The system will fight you. People will try to break you. But if you stand your ground, if you refuse to let them win, you can change things. You can make a difference. She stepped back. That's all I have to say. The reporters erupted with questions. Eleanor walked away. Victor and Torrance fell in beside her. That was one hell of a speech, Victor said. It wasn't a speech. It was the truth. 3 months later, Eleanor stood in front of a new building, freshly painted, clean windows. A sign above the door, Hale Veterans Support Center. It had taken every penny of the settlement money from the lawsuit against Meridian. But it was worth it. Inside were offices, counseling rooms, a medical clinic, resources for veterans struggling with PTSD, homelessness, unemployment. Everything Eleanor wished had existed for Andrew. Torrance appeared beside her. You ready? Eleanor nodded. Let's go. They walked inside together. A crowd had gathered, veterans, families, community members. Daniel was there, volunteering his time. Victor stood in the back, arms crossed, smiling. Eleanor stepped to the front. Thank you all for coming. This center exists because of one simple truth. Our veterans deserve better. They deserve support, respect, a system that actually cares about them. She looked around the room, at the faces watching her. My son Andrew didn't get that. He was failed by the system he served. And for a long time, I didn't know how to fix that, didn't know how to make it right. But then I realized I can't bring him back. But I can make sure other families don't go through what I did. She paused. This center is for him, for every veteran who's been forgotten, for every family that's been left behind, and for everyone who believes we can do better. Applause filled the room. Eleanor stepped back, letting the moment wash over her. Later, as the crowd dispersed and the sun set outside, Eleanor found herself alone in what would become her office. A simple desk, a chair, a window overlooking the street. On the desk sat a photograph. Andrew in his dress blues, smiling. Eleanor picked it up, traced the frame with her thumb. I got them, she whispered. All of them. I hope you're proud. The room stayed quiet, but for the first time in 2 years, Eleanor felt something close to peace. 6 months after the center opened, Eleanor received a letter. Official seal, Department of Defense. She opened it carefully. Inside was a notification. Andrew's death had been officially reclassified, no longer killed in action. Now, killed as a result of criminal negligence and conspiracy. Attached was a full apology. From the Secretary of Defense, and acknowledging what had happened, promising reforms, promising change, and at the bottom, a note, handwritten, Colonel Hale, your son's service and your pursuit of truth have prompted a complete review of our contract oversight procedures. Because of you, we're implementing new safeguards, new accountability measures. This should never happen again. Thank you for your courage. Secretary Martin Breslow. Eleanor read it twice, then folded it and placed it in a drawer beside the presidential commendation. It didn't bring Andrew back, but it was something. That evening, Eleanor drove to the cemetery. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the rows of white headstones. She knelt at Andrew's grave, set down fresh flowers. They changed things, she said softly. Because of you, because of what happened. Other soldiers won't go through what you did. Other families won't suffer like we did. The wind rustled through the trees. Eleanor closed her eyes. I miss you every single day, but I'm going to be okay. I found a purpose, found a way to make your loss mean something. She stood, brushed off her knees. Rest easy, sweetheart. Your fight is over. But mine's just beginning. She walked back to her car, drove through the quiet streets of Silvergate City as evening fell. The city looked different now. Or maybe she did. Either way, Eleanor Hale was no longer the dismissed nurse, the outdated relic, the woman nobody took seriously. She was a force, a symbol. Living proof that one person could stand against corruption and win. A year after the trial, Eleanor was invited to speak at a military medical conference. Hundreds of doctors and nurses. People who'd heard her story wanted to hear her speak. She stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. I spent 26 years in the Army, saved hundreds of lives, earned medals, led teams, and when I retired, I thought that was it. Thought I was done. She paused. Then I took a job at a hospital, and they treated me like I didn't matter, like my experience meant nothing, like I was just taking up space. The room was silent. It would have been easy to quit, to walk away, to accept their judgment and disappear. But I didn't, because I knew something they didn't. I wasn't there for them. I was there for the patients, for the people who needed help, and no amount of disrespect was going to stop me from doing my job. She looked around the room. You're going to face that too. Maybe not as dramatically, but you'll encounter people who dismiss you, who underestimate you, who think they know better. And when that happens, you have a choice. You can let them define you, or you can prove them wrong. She stepped back from the podium. I chose to prove them wrong, and I'd make that choice again, every single time. The applause was deafening. But 2 years after opening the Hale Veterans Support Center, Eleanor received a visit from Torrance. He'd been working with the VA, helping other veterans navigate the system, rebuilding his life one step at a time. "Got something for you," he said, handing her an envelope. Eleanor opened it. Inside was a photo. Torrance and a woman, both smiling, happy. "Her name's Rachel," Torrance said. "She's a social worker. We met at a veterans event 6 months ago." Eleanor smiled. "She looks good for you." "She is. Makes me want to stick around." Eleanor set down the photo. "I'm glad, James. You deserve happiness. So do you." He looked at her. "Are you happy?" Eleanor thought about that, about the center, the work, the lives changed. "I'm not sure happiness is the right word, but I'm fulfilled. I'm making a difference, and that's enough." Torrance nodded. "Andrew would be proud." "I hope so." On the 3rd anniversary of Andrew's death, Eleanor held a memorial service at the center. Families attended, veterans, community members, people whose lives had been touched by the center's work. Eleanor stood at the front. Behind her, a new plaque, brass, engraved, in memory of Marine Sergeant Andrew Hale and all who served with honor and were failed by those who should have protected them. May we do better. 3 years ago, I lost my son, Eleanor said, her voice steady. And for a long time I thought that loss would destroy me, that I'd never recover, never find purpose again. She looked out at the crowd. But I learned something. Loss doesn't have to be the end. It can be the beginning, a catalyst, a reason to fight harder, to do better, to make sure others don't suffer the same way. She gestured to the plaque. Andrew's death wasn't meaningless. It exposed corruption, forced change, saved lives, and that's his legacy, not the way he died, but what his death made possible. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice didn't waver. So today, we remember, we honor, and we commit to continuing the work, to making sure every veteran, every person who serves is treated with the dignity and respect they've earned. She stepped back. The crowd stood, applauded, some crying, some smiling, and Eleanor, surrounded by people she'd helped, people she'd inspired, people who believed in the same fight she did, felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. 5 years after the trial, Eleanor received a call from Senator Barbara Cole. "Colonel Hale, I wanted to let you know the Granger investigation led to 14 more indictments. Military contractors, defense officials, lobbyists. We've dismantled an entire network of corruption." Eleanor sat back in her office chair. "That's good news." "It's more than good. It's historic. And it wouldn't have happened without you." Cole paused. "There's something else. We're drafting legislation, new oversight rules for defense contractors, mandatory reporting requirements, whistleblower protections. We're calling it the Hale Act." Eleanor's throat tightened. "You're naming it after me?" "After you and your son. You both deserve to be remembered for what you did." Eleanor closed her eyes. "Thank you, Senator." "No, thank you. You changed everything." 10 years after walking into Redwood General for the first time, Eleanor stood at the window of her office at the Veterans Center. The building had expanded. 3 floors now, a full medical wing, mental health services, job placement programs. Hundreds of veterans had passed through those doors, found help, found hope, found a second chance. Daniel worked there full-time now. So did Torrance. Victor volunteered on weekends, teaching self-defense classes. Eleanor had built something real, something lasting. Her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Colonel Hale, you don't know me, but I wanted to thank you. I was ready to give up, saw your story on the news, came to the center, got help. I'm still here because you didn't give up. Thank you." Eleanor read it 3 times, then typed back, "I'm glad you're still here. Keep fighting. It's worth it." She set down the phone, looked at the photo of Andrew on her desk. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." Outside, the sun was setting, casting golden light across the city. Eleanor stood, grabbed her coat, walked out into the evening. She passed veterans in the hallway, smiled, nodded, listened to their stories, their struggles, their victories. And as she stepped outside into the cool air, Eleanor Hale, once dismissed, once underestimated, once left for dead, realized something profound. She'd spent her whole life fighting for others, for soldiers, for patients, for people who couldn't fight for themselves. But somewhere along the way, she'd fought for herself too. Proved that age didn't equal irrelevance, that quiet strength was more powerful than loud arrogance, that one person refusing to back down could change the entire system. She wasn't perfect. She'd made mistakes, carried scars, lost people she loved. But she was still standing, still fighting, still making a difference. And that, more than any medal, any commendation, any recognition, was enough. Eleanor walked down the street toward her car, toward home, toward whatever came next. Because her story wasn't about endings. It was about endurance, about refusing to let the world tell you who you were, about defining yourself on your own terms. And for Eleanor Hale, that fight would never be over. But that was okay, because some fights were worth never giving up. The end.